I'm here basically to tell you about my own story, how I found my own career path in the area of education for a more sustainable world. And I guess I hope that my story inspires some of you to find your own path in the future. So before I start, I'd love to know how you feel right now about climate change by doing a quick poll. So when you think about climate change, you may feel four different things. Denial. That would mean that you feel that Earth's climate has been changing forever. It's not a man-made problem and there is nothing to be fixed. Or you might feel despair. Climate change is the biggest issue of our times, but the problem is so big that there is nothing I can do myself to fix it. Hope. Climate change is the biggest issue of our times. I want to take action, but I'm unsure how. And lastly, motivated. Climate change is the biggest issue of our times. I know what to do already to reduce my own impact on the planet, and I'm already doing as much as I can. So take a few seconds, please, and just select the answer that might fit best with your current feelings about climate change. So just to tell you, just to tell you a little bit about myself and my own story, my name is Raquel Noboa. I'm the founder and CEO of 50 Shades Greener, a leading educational company teaching environmental sustainability around the world. But my own career up until 2017 was in hospitality. And to be honest, I fell into hospitality by pure chance. I was 17 years old living in Spain when my dad offered me a one-way ticket to wherever I wanted to go. And destiny has it that a week later, I landed in Shannon in Ireland. I had no English at the time, so my only option was to clean bedrooms as a housekeeping assistant for my first year in Ireland. And that was quite a shock to my system at 17. My immediate family are all academics. My mom is a doctor. My dad is a psychologist turned politician, and my sister is a marine biologist. But when my parents asked me when I was young what I wanted to be when I grew up, I literally had no idea. Two things I did know is that I wanted to be challenged by my career, but that I also wanted to have fun at my job every day. Needless to say that my dad used to think I was crazy or lazy, or a little mix of both. I've never been a person that learned through books or conventional educational methods, which are very much still teacher-led. Back when I was young, I felt inferior. Not good enough, I guess, because I learned in a very different way than my other family members. I've carried those feelings of inferiority pretty much my entire adult life. But I was blessed to fall into hospitality because all of a sudden, I found that place in the world where I could learn by doing. I could learn by watching others doing their own jobs. And it led me to have an amazing career working in many different managerial positions all over the world. It wasn't until 2012 when I started learning about sustainability. Back then, climate change was not spoken about as often as it is now. And back then, there was little information to the regular person like me as to what was going on. It was something only scientists and governments would argue about. Unfortunately, I had already experienced firsthand what nature can do to humanity. I was working in the Maldives in 2004 when the tsunami hit our island in December 26, destroying so many lives in just a few minutes. Eco-anxiety is real. I suffered it myself for years after that event. Eco-anxiety is described as the continued fear of environmental disaster. And unfortunately, it is the young generations that are suffering it the most. The turning point for me was when I was working at Hotel Doolan in Ireland, and I learned how to measure our business carbon emissions. This is when I realized that if I could measure those emissions, I could also manage them and reduce them. And it then became my life's mission to learn more about sustainability and I started creating the 50-step program for environmental sustainability. Knowledge is powerful. Most important, knowledge is empowering. My eco-anxiety started to get better because I felt there was something I could do about climate change, however small my contribution might be. If I reduce my workplace carbon emissions, I was finally doing my best for the planet we all live in. And that made me feel powerful within my own life. In 2017, I finally took the plunge and I founded 50 Shades Greener as an environmental education company. And my life mission became to teach others what I had learned on my own green journey. But of course, imposter syndrome really took hold of me for the first few years as the CEO of an educational company. How could a person like me teach anything to anyone? That question haunted me for years. I guess I've always wanted to be able to speak in a more flourished and professional manner because I grew up in a household where speech and grammar were absolute must-haves. But with English being my second language, once again, I was left feeling inferior and I doubted that my programs would be good enough. Surprisingly, it was my everyday language and colloquial terms that started attracting students to my programs. The feedback I was hearing was, I love the directness of the lessons. It's just pure action-based learning. Or you make it all sound so easy, I feel I can do it. After the initial shock, I started to realize that it was not my language or my teaching methods that needed to change. It was my own mindset about the service that I was providing. For years, I had created this narrative in my head that I was not good enough. And the only person that could change that narrative was me. I wonder if any of you listening today have suffered from imposter syndrome. Well, the number one thing I can assure you is that it's not true. You are good enough. Imposter syndrome is a great enemy for an entrepreneur because it slows you down and it makes you doubt your own ability and decisions. So do whatever you need to do to change that mindset because it will lead you to take more action, find solutions, and improve your own performance. Over the past 5 years, I've built a team of 8 people. I've worked with CEOs, governments, colleges and universities, upskilling entire organizations to become resource efficient. I've even become a public speaker, another great fear of mine. All while that little voice in my head kept saying, you can't possibly do that. The difference is I've learned to totally ignore that voice. And it slowly but surely is getting quieter and quieter. As I adjusted my new mindset, telling myself you are good enough, I also then started questioning how I always felt about traditional methods of education. And that there could be other people like me that felt let down with their own educational journey. I am by no means criticizing education. What I advocate for is for the adoption of the new world we all live in and how we need to adapt many areas of traditional systems to meet the needs of the new generations. With 50 Shades Greener, we promote student-led learning rather than chalk and talk from us, the teachers. We encourage inclusive and practical approaches to teaching so we can empower students to initiate and lead their own behavioral changes to bring a greener future. We don't want to tell students how they should feel about climate change. We need to rather listen to their concerns and address them in a way that empowers them to become the green managers of tomorrow. The world has changed, and we also need to change with it. So let me play you a really short video about our Building a Greener Future, which is our school's program.
Mark is a regular teenager making his way through life. He is worried about climate change and environmental sustainability, and he wished his immediate family and community would try to reduce their carbon footprint. Unfortunately, Mark feels he doesn't have enough knowledge or skills to do anything about it himself. His lifelong journey towards helping climate change started when his school completed the Building a Greener Future program, which is a part of his school curriculum. Within 2 weeks, Mark had learned how to measure his household carbon emissions and identified areas for improvement to reduce his household utilities. 2 weeks later, Mark created a home environmental action plan and started seeing a reduction of his family's carbon emissions. Mark's parents are delighted. Not only are they saving money on their utility bills, they have become more interested in what Mark is doing and decide to get involved, making it a family affair. Having completed the Building a Greener Future program, Mark now feels confident in his knowledge and skills helping support a more sustainable environment. He now leads the Student Green Committee and actively promotes reduction of carbon emissions at school and at home. 3 years later, Mark starts his first job at a local hotel, and he quickly identifies that resource efficiency is an issue. Implementing his skills and knowledge developed from his school's program, he quickly becomes the hotel's green manager with an increase in responsibility and salary. He measures and monitors carbon emissions on a monthly basis and trains his colleagues to also change their own behavior around the use of utilities. Mark feels empowered. He is achieving real change because he is equipped to do so. In the process, he has also brought his family, friends and work colleagues onto his lifelong journey towards environmental sustainability and the reduction of carbon emissions. Building a Greener Future is a program that will teach young generations how to measure, monitor and reduce energy, waste and water, which in turn reduces carbon emissions and saves money from utility bills.
I dream of a future where every single person is aware of their own environmental impact. I dream of a future where every single person can calculate their own carbon footprint. It should be second nature to us, like the ABC or 1, 2, 3. I personally started my own green journey by reducing 3 resources, 3 things that every single person and every business in the world can manage better right now. That is the energy and the water that we use and the waste that we produce. I guess I was born in a country where electricity and water were readily available to us. We didn't have to make any effort to obtain these 2 resources because we could flick a switch or open a tap and there they are. We also don't have to really think about waste. I put mine in the bin outside and it disappears every week as if by a magic trick. What we don't see is that in order to produce that electricity for our homes and our buildings, we're burning fossil fuels. What we don't see is that when we open a water tap to brush our teeth, there are 1.7 billion people in the planet suffering from water scarcity. What we don't see is that when our bins are taken away, they're dumped into landfills, together with the other 2 billion tons of waste generated around the world every year. Personal responsibility matters to fight climate change because every single one of us has the power to do better. So we can choose to have an entire generation of young people feeling anxious and worried about climate change. Or we can empower them to take personal responsibility for their own footprint. We just need to teach them how. Last year, UNESCO released a report stating that education is not giving students sufficient knowledge to adapt, act, and respond to climate change. They're urging for education curriculums to include environmental education worldwide by 2025. The study analyzed educational plans and curriculums in 50 countries across all regions. More than half of them make no reference to climate change. The study notes a lack of attention to socio-emotional skills and action-oriented competences that are central to environmental and climate action. In a survey of 1,600 teachers conducted for the study, 1/3 of respondents indicated that environmental-related issues were not part of teacher training. Right now, Environmental managers, green managers, sustainability officers are being hired in all types of businesses and industries in Europe. It has finally become a real job. But the workforce is not ready for those jobs. The jobs of tomorrow will require green skills at all levels of education, because if they don't, how do we expect to reach our net zero targets? If we rely on the development of technology to decarbonize our countries, we're never going to be able to achieve sustainability. This year, the social media platform LinkedIn conducted a study which found that in 2019, workers with green skills were hired faster than those without green skills. Jobs require green skills are rising by 31% for the past 5 years, while green skills employees have only risen by 21%. It is quite obvious that we need to invest in environmental education, not only to assist climate action, but also to address the future demands of our industries and to ensure that we continue to grow as a society in a more sustainable way. For me personally, I never thought for 1 second that I would end up working for climate action. My own parents would have preferred for me to become a doctor or a lawyer as a more traditional career path. But sustainability has become not only my job, it has now become my life's mission, and the reason why I want to get up every morning. So to all the young people listening today, here are my 3 top tips. It is okay not to know what career you want right now. Life will show you what your passion is, and you can make a career out of it. You are good enough. Always remember that, no matter what situation you're in. And lastly, keep learning. Never ever think that you know it all. I'm now 42 years old, but I continue to learn every single day. And when it comes to climate change, I guess we have 2 clear choices. Number 1, we can continue living our lives as we have, make no changes at all, and hope for the best, I guess. Or number 2, we can learn how to reduce our impact on the planet and take real action every day. 2 clear choices and no wrong answer, really, because the choice is up to each and every one of us to make. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me today. I wonder, can we share the results of the poll just out of interest? I'd like to know how people feel about climate change. Well, 44% of you have hope, which means you want to do something about climate change. You're just unsure how, and hence this is why education for environmental sustainability is so important. But 26% of you feel motivated and you're already taking action, which is absolutely unbelievable. And 26% feel despair. I hope, and I know, listening to someone speak for 20 minutes is not really going to change your view on such a big subject. But I hope I have given you some slight seeds of inspiration so that you can start taking your own climate action.